Hi, everybody, and welcome to the latest webinar in our CyberProof Security series, how we operationalize your CTEM program. So if you'll just stick around for the next 15 seconds while we allow additional people to join, we'll be starting shortly. All right, well, let's kick this off. This is part of our CyberProof Security series. You may have seen some of the other webinars. We've done how we do advanced threat hunting, how we do cyber threat intelligence. This is how we operationalize your CTEM program. There's going to be a whole bunch of these in the next few months. So you feel free to please register for that series. Some logistics for today's webinar. Firstly, there's a Q&A panel at the bottom. Please ask your questions to our subject matter experts, Brendon and Nick, at any time. I wouldn't consider myself a subject matter expert, but you can ask me questions if you wish. There will be 3 polls, and we look forward to your active participation. There are a whole bunch of attachments at the bottom of your screen, including a copy of these slides. So you can download the slides at any time and look at the other attachment. There's probably some stuff that's valuable. We're recording the webinar, and you can actually see the recording later using the same link that you're using now. And please stick around, because later in the webinar, there are a few calls to action, things that you can do yourself, which are valuable. And especially there is a free offer for webinar attendees. So please stick around for those. Introducing our webinar experts, I mentioned before, our subject matter experts. Nick is the CEO and co-founder of Interpres and the president of the Interpres Group in CyberProof. Interpres was acquired by CyberProof in December of 2022. And Brendon Anderson is a senior cybersecurity consultant and an expert in all things in Interpres and the platform and the capabilities. And he'll be responsible for the technical deep dive and the demo later in the webinar. So I'm going to kick this off to Nick directly after the slide, but we'll do some introductions. This is what I've been doing now at 60 miles an hour. Nick will provide the business level perspective and the problem statement. And then Brendon will go into the technical deep dive, the demo, and we have, as I mentioned, next steps, calls to action, questions and answers, summaries, you name it, we have it. And handing over to Nick.
On our capabilities, as Jonathan had mentioned, we were acquired into CyberProof back in December, and what CyberProof does is a whole slew of managed security services, MDR type services, and also exposure management. So we're providing this to some of the world's largest global organizations that are out there. A little bit about UST. So CyberProof is a wholly owned division of UST. UST is a 35,000 person IT consulting organization that spans across 30 plus customers, has 160 of the global 1000s as customers, is on a very rapid trajectory and growth path, and provides us with a lot of other capabilities that other MDR and managed service providers just simply can't provide. So that marrying together of IT with cybersecurity, the NOC and the SOC, we can bring some really interesting capabilities to bear within an environment. Now, just focusing in on CyberProof, we've been around for 8 years. It was born out of a lot of the business that UST was driving in the security side, so they just formed CyberProof around it. So 1,000 employees, 7 SOCs around the world. So the sun doesn't set on our SOCs, and we've got 85 very large, enterprise clients around the world, and we are a part of and have been acquired into CyberProof. And so some of the capabilities, that we like to focus in on here is, we want to be transparent. We want to co-manage the environments with you. We're delivering cloud-first environments, although we do work in hybrid environments as well. We're AI enabling a multitude of our services, both internally and externally. And we really help customers to empower their cybersecurity programs. And we help fill the gaps where there are gaps, and we are very much aligned with doing security better together. So I'm going to hand it back to Jonathan here for the first poll.
Got it. Thank you, Nick. So the first poll, I'm kicking it off as we speak. You'll probably be able to see it at the bottom of your screen. And I'm going to read it through. So the question for the audience is, what is your biggest challenge in continuously assessing your threat exposure? So answer number one is lack of visibility into assets and attack surfaces. Answer two is lack of automation and integration across existing tools. Answer three is shortage of skilled personnel. Answer four is difficulty prioritizing vulnerabilities. And answer five is lack of executive support. So again, the question, what is your biggest challenge in continuously assessing your threat exposure? And I'm going to leave this open while you have the opportunity to answer, and I will hand it back to Nick. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. So next, we're going to go through the problem statement and kind of the business level perspective of what we do. So what we've done is we built a platform that optimizes an organization's defenses against the threats that most likely are targeting that organization, using the capabilities that are already resident within your environment. And the issue that we're going after is that today's approach to assessing defensive capabilities readiness is really broken. There isn't a holistic view that goes in and continuously identifies and prioritizes coverage gaps and tool deficiencies and misconfigured policies and controls from a defensive standpoint, while also being able to marry together with that, prioritize threat intelligence of the actors that are targeting you. So, what we're really focusing in on and what we're really solving for is, what threats should I care about most? What are the gaps in my defenses related to those targeted threats? And what do I need to go and fix first? So, what the platform provides is kind of this connective tissue of all the various CTEM type capabilities, and shows you exactly where you need to focus your limited resources and where to optimize your defenses from a tooling perspective. And CTEM, as many of you may know, was something that Gartner had originally coined. And when they came out with this, we were very excited. We had already had our first set of patents already completed. And we thought, fantastic. And we read the report and said, okay, we get it. But, what they were saying is, hey, you should be able to take and pull together, automated pen testing and DRPS and, external attack surface management and internal attack surface management and BAS and vulnerability assessment, et cetera, and pull all this information together and do something with it. Well, the problem is that these are very complex technologies. All of the capabilities are, for the most part, siloed together, although you now have CTEM players that are pulling together various components of it. EDRs are pulling in vuln scanning capabilities or asset capabilities. You have vuln scanners pulling in asset capabilities, et cetera. But the hurdles still reside of, how do I prioritize what's most important? And more importantly, and Gartner recognizes this as well, is that what's missing is a control layer. There's nothing there from an intelligence layer that pulls all of this data together into one location where you can do something with it and put it into action. And that's really where we come in, is we CTEM enable that environment. So we pull together the data that's resident within your environment, from the vuln scanners to the data lakes and SIM to the EDRs, et cetera. And we marry that together with the threat intelligence data. That in turn allows us to identify the gaps in coverage and the tool deficiencies and the misconfigurations from a defensive standpoint. And then we provide the prioritization in terms of what you need to do to go and fix first. And so the three pillars of the solution are the threat exposure side of it. So who are the threat actors? What campaigns are being run actively today against organizations that look and smell and feel like we do? What are the TTPs being used? What are the malware being used? What should we care about? And then we take that and we marry that into the attack surface. So we identify what's exploitable, right, from an infrastructure standpoint. So, what are the assets? What are the identities? What are the vulnerabilities associated with those assets? What do we need to care about that has got exposure to it? And then we look at the defensive action side of it. What do we need to do to defend ourselves against this, right? So what CVEs are tied to assets in our environment and identities in our environment that are of concern? What are the TTPs that are being used in conjunction with that? And then what do we need to do to counterweight those TTPs by turning on visibility in order to write the proper detections and to make sure that the proper controls are enacted across our infrastructure? And so the way that the solution works is we have an analytic that connects into 50 of the most common products that provide visibility, detections, controls within your environment. So think of minimally, we want the SIM data lake, the EDR, the vuln scanner. But if you have also connectivity for us for the next gen firewall, for network scanning, for cloud scanning, for email scanning, perfect, even better, it'll be more enriched. And then what we do is we curate that information with TTP-based finish intel that we pull from 51 sources, and CISA, CrowdStrike, et cetera. And then we use models and analytics to go through and analyze all the dynamic relationships that exist between your defensive capabilities, the adversarial threats, your assets, vulnerabilities, and then we prioritize a list of recommended actions to harden your defenses against those prioritized threats and to optimize the entire ecosystem to make sure that your tooling is being implemented properly in order to defend itself, in order to defend the environment the best that it can. And the way that we look at this is we look at cybersecurity as just a number of interconnections. So we connect in our solution all of the elements of threat with all of the elements of defense. And we do this in a way where we don't deploy agents, we don't deploy sensors with your environment. We just do this through one-way API pulls of the infrastructure that's there. So we're able to assess in your environment, once we build the threat profile of your organization, and Brendon will get into this in the demo, but once we build that threat profile, we now know the threat groups that are out there that are targeting organizations that look and smell and feel like you. We know the active campaigns that are being run, what malware tools are using, what TTPs are being exploited, and what CVEs are related there. And then we tie all of that back, we tie those CVEs back into the assets that are susceptible in your environment. We attach identities to those assets, and then we back out and we look at what's the connection between those CVEs and the TTPs that are being used in the campaigns. And then we focus in on what do we need to do defensively against those TTPs? What visibility do we need to turn on so that we can write the proper detection logic, and what configurations do we need to address in order to make sure that we have those attack paths defended against? And then we've had a number of successes within large organizations. But everything from decreasing defensive readiness in terms of, hey, the latest exploit comes out, how long does it take us to respond to it? How long do we know does it take us to understand whether we are threaded properly defensively in order to defend against this? We've been able to augment the capabilities of CTI teams and Intel Fusion teams, and we've been really able to decrease the amount of time it takes to understand exposure risk in an organization. And we've got a couple of use cases that we want to share with you here in a few slides to talk about that. So the way we pull all this together within CyberProof is we not only tie the Interpres platform into CTEM enabling organizations, but we also pull together the services capabilities that are resident within our organization, where we really have world-class capabilities from the standpoint of providing cyber threat intelligence, of providing vulnerability prioritization, of providing detection, engineering, and of being able to really mold all this together and frame it within a managed detection and response service so that we're continuously being able to provide a exposure management capability where we can either drop ship it in whole in an environment, or we can piecemeal it out to where if organizations have gaps within their own programs, we can provide either the service or the platform coverage that's necessary in order to really provide a full-blown exposure management framework and capability. We've had a lot of recognition within Gartner over the past year plus. So there's a number of guides and a number of insights and papers that they have done where we've been mentioned and have been viewed as leaders in the category. So I'd recommend that you go out and take a look at some of these. They're very descriptive in their approach of how to run exposure management effectively in the environment, and so we've got a lot of great interaction with Gartner that's ongoing that we really appreciate. And then one of the case studies in terms of how we help organization, and this one focuses really in on the defensive readiness use case, and we've deployed within this environment, but we've got multiple other use cases that we're going to do. But I'm just going to focus on this one, and so. This is a large global insurer, 80 operating companies around the world. Prior to us working with them, they had a close brush several summers ago with MOVEit. That prompted them to build us into one of their programs that they were developing. And so during that process of MOVEit, it took the organization 6 weeks to go out manually to determine readiness against the MOVEit threat across all of their 80 operating companies around the world. Fast forward about a year and a half, this past Christmas when CLOP came out, I got a call from their head of threat intel, global threat intel, and he said, what took us 6 weeks a year and a half ago before we deployed Interpres now took us about 3 minutes to determine that readiness. So that ability to shrink down the time frame to understand organizationally how well the defensive tooling is set up for that threat, was just a drastic decrease in time. And so that's one example of how the product and the platform is used. And then I'm going to hand it off here to Brendon to talk about another use case that we had in the retail and healthcare world.
Yeah, thanks so much, Nick. So definitely encourage everyone to follow up with that URL and read the full use case. But effectively, what we were doing here was working with a major retailer as well as a major healthcare provider. And by deploying Interpres, we were able to conduct a full scope assessment of their environment. And what we found was they had very strong out-of-the-box enablement of their tools. They were leveraging roughly 97% of the detections that were built into their tooling right now. But by applying that threat-driven lens and then understanding where those gaps truly lie in their defense surface, we determined that for a significant amount of their highly prioritized threats, of the top 10 techniques that they were facing, 6 out of 10 of those techniques had either no or very minimal detection coverage. And so this is really the value of coming to the table with that understanding of threat, building out a threat profile for an organization, and then doing that granular examination of where those defensive capabilities actually map to in terms of that threat. It may be the case that you think you're covered based on turning all of the functionality of a tool that you buy on, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those capabilities are actually oriented toward the threats that matter for your organization. And so I think we're going to a quick poll before the technical demo.
Yep, thank you. So poll number 2. Let me read it off. The question is, how do you currently prioritize vulnerabilities or risks in your organization? So answer option number 1 is manually based on internal assessment. Answer 2 is using traditional vulnerability management tools. Answer 3 is based on threat intelligence. Answer 4 is automated risk-based approach, CTEM-like, as we're discussing right now. And answer 5 is no clear prioritization process in place. So read again through the question, the potential answers, and we'd be happy to see your vote. And I am going to hand you back to Brendon.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonathan. So we'll get right into the tool. Alrighty. And Jonathan, can you just give me a thumbs up that we have my screen?
Yeah, we see your screen fine.
Perfect. All right. So as we move through the tool, you're going to see that the demo is going to kind of follow along those three key pillars, the ones that we addressed before, beginning with an understanding of the threat, determining your defense surface and the capabilities existing in your tools right now, and then moving to that fundamental understanding of exposure. Where do the exposure points lie, given those relationships between elements of threat and elements of the defense surface? So the first thing that we do is develop a threat profile for a particular organization, just showing you on the screen some of the things that we model out, the industry verticals that you're participating in, the size of your organization, any geolocations where you're operating or controlled data types that you're responsible for, and then the platforms that comprise your environment. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this threat profile as a lens through which we're going to filter and prioritize the ocean of threat intelligence that we take into the platform. And by doing this, we can understand the victimology of certain campaigns, which attackers are targeting organizations that are in your vertical or are in your geolocation, and through an understanding of which threat actors are conducting campaigns against organizations that look like you in the past, we can understand which of those threats you're more likely to face in the future, and then by extension, which of those TTPs that are used by those threat actors you need to be paying attention to. And so the next step here is bringing in that campaign intelligence. As we showed within the slide deck, we consume campaign intelligence from a broad variety of sources. And from all these different campaigns, as you can see in the associations column on the screen, we're parsing out all those elements of threat that are constituent to the campaign itself. So what threat actors were responsible, what TTPs did they use, what malware or living off the land binaries were used, and then any vulnerabilities that were exploited as well. We parse out all of these programmatically, and then we assess the victimology of those campaigns as it compares to your specific threat profile. So as we see a particular threat actor targeting your industry vertical more often, and then by extension using TTPs against organizations that look like you more often, we're going to prioritize those TTPs because that's that understanding of density and how likely you are to face this actor or their TTPs in the future. So the second component there, again, that second kind of pillar is integrating with your security tools. As we said in the presentation, all the integrations are through read-only APIs. There's no agents to deploy, no sensors to deploy. We integrate via read-only APIs, and then we inventory your entire defense surface. So we're taking a look at the detections that you have in place right now, the telemetry that you're collecting, which log sources you're collecting, as well as the control configuration of your tools. And we're mapping all those things to those prioritized elements of threat so that you can understand how well you're prepared right now. And then also by extension, what are the improvements that you need to make? Are there detections that are mapped to a particular prioritized threat that aren't enabled at the moment? Or is your out-of-the-box detection posture limited and you need to investigate either adding in some additional detections or engaging some kind of a detection engineering service? So just a kind of quick view of how this kind of relationship between elements of threat and elements of defense surface manifests within the platform. So right now we're looking at a CrowdStrike Falcon instance and all of the detections that Interpres has been able to inventory from CrowdStrike Falcon. And here you'll see the associations to different elements of threat. So either a MITRE TTP, a software family, a malware, or a living off the land binary, or a particular threat group itself. There are a couple different ways that these associations make their way into the platform. We can certainly take in those mappings if they already exist in your tooling, if you've gone through the exercise of mapping out your entire defense surface to MITRE. But obviously, that's an incredibly time-consuming process, and it requires a lot of threat intelligence expertise as well. So we have an auto mapper within the platform that will evaluate the detection itself and then attempt to make an association to those elements of threat. So whether it's a detection for a specific TTP, whether it's a detection for a particular family of malware, or some kind of a behavior pattern for a specific threat actor, Interpres is able to make an assessment and then add those associations so that you don't have to go through that exercise yourself. The final component, really kind of understanding where your exposure lies in your organization, is that vulnerability and asset context as well. So when it comes to vulnerability prioritization, we go a lot deeper than the vast majority of other tools that are in the space. not only do we take into account the various scores that are applied to the vulnerability, the CVSS score, the EPSS score, and others, but we're also looking at both what the vulnerability looks like in the wild and what that vulnerability would look like in your specific environment. So in terms of in the wild, we're assessing whether or not this vulnerability is seeing active exploitation in the wild, and also any campaign associations. So again, everything in the platform is driven by threat intelligence. As we see a vulnerability being exploited by threat actors against organizations that look like you and fit your threat profile, that's going to increase the priority of that vulnerability, because it increases the likelihood that it's going to be exploited based on those threat actors that are likely to target you. And then in terms of evaluating this vulnerability in your specific environment, what we can do based on all that campaign threat intelligence is we can look at the post-exploitation TTPs that tend to follow a particular vulnerability, and we can assess your level of coverage for those post-exploitation TTPs. So as we see a threat actor exploit this vulnerability, we understand what kind of techniques they're using to escalate privileges, to move laterally, to conduct all that post-exploitation activity. And because we're assessing your level of coverage, your detection coverage, your visibility coverage, and your control coverage against those TTPs, we can factor that into vulnerability prioritization so that you can get a comprehensive understanding of not only what are the scores say about this vulnerability, but if it were to be exploited in my specific environment, would I have the right controls in place to be able to detect and ideally mitigate any of that post-exploitation activity that we know tends to follow this particular vulnerability based on that campaign intelligence. So those are sort of the three key pillars, and now we're going to see how all these different insights manifest within the platform and how you can use Interpres to make improvements to your overall defense surface. So just going over the dashboard quickly, over in the top left-hand corner, we have the overall exposure metric for the organization. This is the key metric within Interpres. Name of the game is obviously to drive this down over time. The exposure score is driven by 3 sub-scores. So first off, the threat exposure score, which is a representation of your prioritized threat landscape. The defense surface score, which is that enumeration of your defensive capabilities. How many capabilities are you leveraging right now? And are any capabilities that you're not leveraging mapped to threats of priority? And then asset exposure, of course, taking into account vulnerabilities and how many assets are affected by that vulnerability, but also some contextual information about those assets. Because we're collecting asset data from any of the integrations that will provide it to us, we're able to cross-reference those asset libraries to identify potential gaps in, say, the EDR surface or your vulnerability scanner. If we see an asset that's reported by maybe some of your technologies, but not reported by your EDR technology, we're going to tag that asset accordingly and identify that it may not have the EDR agent deployed. And then that's also going to increase the exposure potential for that particular asset as well. So that's how we derive that asset exposure score. Just showing here the three key pillars as they relate back to what you saw on the slide deck, beginning with an understanding of the threat landscape. These are the top 10 prioritized threats for your particular threat profile, as well as the level of coverage that you have for these threats at the moment. So that's represented by this content score here. This content score is effectively a 0 to 100 scale that says how much coverage you have for this particular threat, whether it's a threat actor or a technique at the moment, and basically a representation of your current capabilities relative to the maximum that you could have if your tools were configured optimally. So just a quick way to identify areas for improvement across the platform is just looking at that priority score as well as the content score. From a defense surface perspective, again, showing the enablement of your various tools. So for all the tools that you have integrated in your environment, from a detection perspective, how many detections are enabled versus disabled on a particular technology? How many log source categories are you collecting from your various logging tools, your SIM, your data lake? How many categories of logging you're collecting at the moment? And then we are also able to take a look at how many alerts particular detections are generating. Just as kind of an example of how this has been used in the past, we had a particular customer that went through a reprioritization exercise of their detection library for the SOC, and they effectively wanted to understand a ratio between whether or not the detection was mapped to a threat of priority and the volume of alerts that it was generating, so that the SOC could drive eyes onto those threats that matter the most and identify which detections they need to up prioritize based on that association to a significant threat. Then finally, from a vulnerability perspective, just a couple of different lenses through which to look at vulnerabilities. First off, assets with known exploited vulnerabilities. So obviously a vulnerability that's seeing active exploitation in the wild. We want to be able to pay attention to that. So we have a prioritized list that's also sorted by the asset density for that particular vulnerability, so that you can understand for those known exploited vulnerabilities, what's the population of assets affected by it, and certainly get that list as well and be able to export it to a vulnerability management team. Next up, vulnerabilities used in campaigns. So these are the ones that we're seeing and have active campaign reporting on. Again, same exercise, being able to export this list and understand also by extension the post-exploitation TTPs that tend to follow these vulnerabilities. And then finally, just turning that around and looking at the campaigns themselves, understanding which recent campaigns have involved some kind of a vulnerability. Down here at the bottom of the screen, we have a heat map of the MITRE framework. Each of these individual boxes is a MITRE technique, and they're grouped by the tactic that they fall under. The boxes are sized by the priority of that technique. So the higher priority of the technique, the bigger the box. And then they're colored by the amount of coverage that you have for that technique. So green being some sufficient level of coverage, gray being some level of deficiency, and then red being those most significant areas of deficiency. So just a visual way to identify areas of the MITRE framework that you might be overly exposed to with your current configuration. Over on the right-hand side, we have the activity feed. So when I talk about CTEM, I like to say that, continuous threat exposure management, every part of that acronym is important. And this is really how that continuous component manifests within the platform. As we showed within the slides, we have certain organizations can do these point-in-time exercises, map out their detection space, map it to MITRE, get an understanding of the threat landscape. That's a very time-consuming process, and then it tends to be the case that since the threat landscape changes and your internal environment changes over time, the moment you complete that exercise, the data is already stale. So this activity feed is a running log of all those changes that we can see that are going to affect your exposure. That might be an internal change, maybe a sensor went down and we lost a certain kind of logging, maybe a detection was disabled for tuning, or new vulnerabilities were identified by your vulnerability scanner. All those changes are going to have an impact to your overall exposure, and so we track them here and let you understand not only what the change was, but also what was the impact to my potential exposure. And then those external changes, new campaign reports that break, new threat actors that have emerged. So this is a way that you can stay on top of all those changes in your internal and external landscape that are going to potentially affect your exposure. So we'll get into a quick workflow just to kind of demonstrate from an operator perspective, how would you make use of Interpres? What we're going to highlight here is the defensive readiness use case. So something that Nick talked about in the presentation. As new campaign reports break, I spent a lot of time in my career in the SOC. This is a common exercise. Something breaks in the news and everyone wants to understand, first off, is this something that's relevant to us? And then secondarily, if it is relevant to us, what's our current level of exposure to the activity that's going on in this campaign? And so Interpres really helps you expedite that process. And so what we'll do is we'll pick on a specific campaign report here. Within the campaign screen, you're going to get a brief description of what's going on in the campaign itself. And then in the middle section, you're going to see basically that data map that we showed in the presentation, right? All the elements of threat all mapped together, and then they're going to be associated to the campaign based on the activity that we saw within the campaign, as well as the vulnerabilities, any vulnerabilities that were exploited over the course of the campaign. So walking through this, typically what I'll start off with is an assessment of the vulnerabilities. You can see there was a vulnerability used in this campaign, fairly high priority for our organization, and it's currently affecting 10 assets at the moment. So definitely want to hone in on that. We know that this campaign is active right now, and this vulnerability is present in our environment. So definitely want to pay attention to that. But then moving on to an assessment of all the different elements of threat that are constituent to this campaign. So doing an assessment of the techniques, we can see we have 9 techniques that were used in this campaign that are high priority for our threat profile. And again, just looking at that content score, we can see we have some deficiencies in terms of content for some of these fairly high priority techniques. If we take a look at disable or modify tools, within an element of threat, you're going to see all the elements of the defense surface that this element of threat maps to. So what kind of logging sources can help you detect this kind of activity? What detections do you have in place that are mapped to this particular element of threat at the moment? So from a visibility perspective, we can see we have 8 categories of visibility that would help us detect this activity. We're currently collecting 4, but there are 4 missing at the moment. So is there a way that we can potentially get these data sources moving into the platform, either into our Splunk instance or wherever we're collecting logs? And then from a detection perspective, we can see we have 93 total detections that map to this particular threat, but they're all disabled at the moment. And so this is where, kind of thinking back to that use case, even if you have strong detection enablement out of the box, everything that was built in you're using at the moment, that might not mean that everything everything is accounting for elements of threat and high priority elements of threat. And so really being able to do that granular assessment as it relates to new breaking threat intelligence, that's a core use case for Interpres. In cases where we identify that potentially we're using all of the detections that we have out of the box, but we still want a more robust posture, we do also offer reference detections as well. So these are open source detections that we collate generally from the vendors. We provide a brief description of what the detection is looking for, and then the logic as well. So this is an immediate way to make an improvement to your detection posture relative to a specific technique of interest. You can take this logic, pipe it right into the relevant tooling, and immediately have a new detection for this particular technique. And so that's the operationalization of threat intelligence as it kind of manifests within Interpres, being able to understand the threats of priority to your organization, what elements of the defense surface you need in order to be able to account for those priority threats, and then helping you identify where those potential gaps live. So I think that should be the conclusion of the demo.
Awesome. Thanks, Brendon. You going to do any additional technical deep dives, or you want to go straight into the poll?
No, we can go into the poll.
All right. So let me quickly pull that up. I'll pull that up. There we go. So we're going into poll number 3. So let me put it up quickly. Poll number 3 basically says the following: how can we follow up with you after this webinar, if you'd like us to follow up with you? So the options are: 1, let's schedule a call to discuss CTEM strategy for my organization. Option number 2 is: please connect me with a cybersecurity expert. I have some questions. Option 3, I'd like a free threat exposure and defense readiness assessment. So that's a little bit of a tricky one because we haven't showed you that slide yet, but we will be showing you that slide. I'll be showing you that slide in a couple of slides time. So I'm going to keep this poll up so you can choose that if that's what you'd like. And that's the special offer. Answer 4, please connect me with someone in your sales team to discuss an opportunity to work together. And answer 5, something else not covered above, please contact me and I will explain. So I'm going to leave this poll open for a while so you can choose if there's anything that we'd like us to contact you about. We'll be happy to do that. And I'm going to move on into this slide. I think, Nick, you said that you would explain it, right?
Yeah. So, as we talked about before, right, the ability for us to enable CTEM is really pretty significant. As we talked about, the platform and the capabilities, is providing that connective tissue for all the infrastructure that's required in order to pull together, a real exposure management view that ties together the, pillars that we've talked about, the 3 particular pillars of the, attack surface, of the threats, and of the defense surface. But, bringing this together with all of our different services that we provide that are, complementary to an exposure management program is really powerful. And as we'd said, right, kind of that services component of it, everything from detection engineering to log management to use case management to CTI services, are all complementary to what we're doing and providing as an organization. Jonathan, back to you.
Yes, sir. Thanks. So some next steps that you can check out. Firstly, if you're interested to learn more about the CTEM capabilities on the CyberProof platform, the platform that was developed by Interpres Security, that was acquired by CyberProof in December 2024 last year. Please feel free to either check in the attachments at the bottom of your screen, or you can use that, what's it called, the vanity URL, and you can read more about that. You'll be able to find that on our website. And now we have that special offer to that I referred to a little bit earlier, which is there are three actually. Firstly, there is a QR code where you can take a self-driven tour through the CTEM platform, or the platform that enables you to operationalize your CTEM strategy. Then you can get a 30-day trial for free. Basically, you would apply for it with the QR code or use with that vanity URL. We would help you to connect up to any APIs that you're interested in connecting up to, and we would provide you with 30-day access to the software, the SaaS software. So that's like almost a white glove onboarding. This is the special offer. Or option number three, you can book a demo, and Brendon or somebody else from the team would be very happy to take you through the platform in a little bit more detail. I know that you got the I don't know 15-minute version on this webinar, but Brendon or anybody else in the team would be able to do that in more detail and answer your questions. So these are all next steps that you can take, and you can go to them all via the special the attachments at the bottom of your screen. And now is a good time to ask any questions. Let's see if we have any questions on the Q&A session. So here's the first question. I'm not sure if Nick or Brendon, if you want to answer it, but there's a lot of CTEM platforms or say that they use CTEM out in the environment. What is the difference between the Interpres solution, the CyberProof solution, and all of those other solutions that are out there?
Yeah, sure. So I would say, first off, from a kind of platform and technology perspective, Interpres goes into a lot more depth than you'll find with the vast majority of CTEM providers. Again, getting that level of granularity down to what discrete log sources we need in order to feed the detections that are mapped to a threat of priority. That's not something that you're going to see across the vast majority of CTEM providers. Also, our threat intelligence focus, being able to programmatically parse out all these different campaigns and assess your defensive readiness for these campaigns. That's also a differentiator that you're not going to see in the vast majority of other tools that say they do CTEM, but a lot actually don't in the end. And then certainly from a CyberProof Interpres differentiator, one of the things that we bring to the table is all the services that we have in our quiver. They all dovetail perfectly with what Interpres brings to the table. So as we saw within the demo, being able to understand where deficiencies lie in your detection posture, our use case management service is able to leverage the insights that they get from Interpres in order to prioritize detection engineering resources, so that all those resources that you're putting into the service are going to threats of priority. Same thing for vulnerability management, being able to have that comprehensive understanding of why the vulnerabilities are specifically important to your organization, and then leveraging those vulnerability management resources. Really, the entire service quiver of CyberProof dovetails perfectly with the insights that you're going to get out of Interpres.
Fantastic. Nick, do you want to add anything on top of that, or can we go to question number 2?
Yeah, look, I think that the thing is that we do is that we provide a far more holistic view across multiple technologies. Not just a single platform. So we've got this approach that we had right from the very inception of the company, is that we wanted to be a single source of truth across all the various technology vendors that feed into your environment, and be able to provide that viewpoint and vantage point of how to best have all of these various technologies interoperate and work together in order to make sure that your security posture is optimized.
Fantastic. So the second question is for you, Nick. I have 2 questions. Firstly, where do you see the CTEM and CTEM related market going in the next 6 to 12 months? And the second question is, do you think that other mergers and acquisitions will take place between CTEM platform vendors and cybersecurity services vendors like CyberProof?
Yeah, look, I think that where the market is going is, to really hone in on truly putting their arms around organizations putting their arms around their exposure, right? And how do you manage it, and what do you need to do defensively in order to optimize it? Make sure that it's trending up and to the right. And yes, I do. I think this is a conversation that I had with Gartner, and Gartner ended up putting a piece out on this, that there's going to be a consolidation in CTEM. The players that say that they're pure CTEM providers or solutions just isn't correct, right? CTEM is a program, and it encompasses multiple technologies that no one single platform player or vendor can provide. And so there will definitely be a consolidation in this space from a holistic solution standpoint of providing continuous threat exposure management.
Fantastic, thanks, Nick. And the last question that we have, at least in the panel, unless somebody else is going to add a question later in the game, is how do you see agentic AI impacting this platform, and in fact impacting other cybersecurity services?
Brendon, you want to go first on this?
Sure, absolutely. So I think one of the things that we're seeing is, basically the translation of where would you have a human in the process, and then applying an agent to that. I think really the benefit of the marriage between agentic AI and CTEM is agentic AI is better when you can bring more data to the table. And so what we're going to see is, an agent that's going to be responsible for every individual piece of what we saw in here, an agent that's responsible for understanding the prioritization of various vulnerabilities, an agent that's responsible for understanding the specific threat landscape, and then an orchestrator agent, right? Someone that's at the top of this stack that is responsible for taking in all this various information and making decisions about what needs to be remediated in the defense surface, what needs to change in the environment in order to positively improve your overall exposure. So I think really the way that we're going to see agentic affect the CTEM landscape is a better, faster way to implement it, and maintaining specific context with all these different agents, which is of course going to be reliant on a particular platform that's able to generate all this data and perform all these analytics in the first place. So.
Yeah, and then in addition to that, I mean, what we're doing too is, besides all of the agentic AI capabilities that we're building in and utilizing already within the platform, we're also going to marry that together with the other agentic AI initiatives of some of our strategic partners and other security vendor and providers, and bringing all of that data to bear as well, from the standpoint of correlating and again providing more of a holistic view across the environment. Fantastic.
Brendon, Nick, thank you. There aren't any more questions. So I'll give you both the opportunity just to say thanks to everyone for joining.
Yep. Thanks so much.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chance. Appreciate that. And just a reminder, you may think that you're here to watch us, but we're here in order to help you and to provide you with valuable content. Please feel free to email us. Our email's on the bottom left-hand side. If you have any questions, if you'd like to see additional content, if there's anything we can do to help, if you, our audience, our viewers, were not here to watch, we would not have a value for being here. So thanks again, gentlemen. Thank you for the viewers. And we look forward to seeing you in our next series and our next webinar. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.